It's preptober. Oh my word. I can't wait to share the 7 things that I'm going to do before I start my novel this year. My intention is to really bring as much joy as I can into this process. And for me, that starts with inspiration. Now, at the start of this year, I completed the Artist Way. And in that course, there were so many questions, but all of them sort of came back to the type of movie I'd want to write or movie I'd want to be in or something along those lines. But I can't tell you how many times Eat, Pray, Love was one of my answers. So I went out to go buy the book. I've watched the movie so many times, but I actually have never purchased the book. And seeing that I'm writing a novel, I thought it would be a great idea to get out there and buy the novel so that I could get inspired from the actual words on the pages. It was strangely difficult to get my hands on a copy. My bookstore had so many other Elizabeth Gilbert books, but I did manage to find a copy of Eat, Pray, Love, which was such a win. Another book that I coincidentally started reading was The Girls of Summer, and this book has really inspired me, mainly from a structure point of view. So the chapters are broken down between then and now. And I really enjoyed this. I managed to follow the story quite easily, but the way that these chapters were structured almost allowed for 2 different stories to be told and sort of bound together at the end. And there's something to this that really got me excited, and I think I might be following this approach when it comes to writing my book. Now, when I'm reading these books, I am reading them with a bit of a critical eye, so I am looking at what I'm reading as opposed to just allowing myself to get lost in the story. But these books are both so great that I'm having to focus really hard because, man oh man, it is just so easy to get lost in the story. The next thing that I'm focusing on is creating a safe place to beat out, that's quite a strong word, maybe rather release self-doubt or limiting thoughts. So what this looks like for me is a different take on morning pages that Julia Cameron made famous in her book or in her course, The Artist's Way. So I kind of take up 2 pages in my journal. The first is with a bit of a daily prayer, and the next page I have taken something from Elizabeth Gilbert. So I've heard her speak on a couple of podcasts about A Letter from Love.
And the question that you ask is, Dear Love, what would you have me know today?
I found that I'm particularly hard on myself, and writing to myself from a space of love and just the way that I speak to myself and listen, I guess, during this time of my day. Wow.
What if all it is just you writing to yourself from a kinder voice within you? Wouldn't that be worthy enough to be slightly life-changing, besides the terrorist who lives inside your head constantly telling you how you failed? Like, why not change the channel in your own head?
And then finally, I got myself a little book that is really going to just be dedicated to this journey of writing my novel. And every day I try to write at least a sentence or a phrase about the book that I'm writing. So I sometimes just get these ideas, and if they stay around till the next day when I'm writing, it's generally a bit of a sticky idea, which means I'll want to write it down. But I mean, I'm not putting any pressure on myself. It's very, very chilled. It's a word some days it's a couple of sentences. I have no expectations apart from having to write at least something down daily with regards to my book. Now, the next thing that I've done, which I've also been inspired to do from listening to Elizabeth Gilbert on a podcast, is decide who I'm writing to when I'm writing my book.
A really good tip that I can also offer is I write every one of my books for and to somebody, specifically a person, a single person. And lots of times when people are working on, I'll just speak to writing books, but when people are working on a book, I ask them who it's for. Who are they writing it for? And they answer with a demographic. And they say, I'm writing it for women who have been through divorce. I'm writing it through people who have been through domestic violence. I'm writing it for people who are recovering for addiction. I'm writing it for young girls with eating disorders. And that's not a person. That's not a human being. That's a voting block. That's a demographic. And if you write to a demographic, your work will sound like it's a pamphlet. that it's an informative brochure. And that is not what we want our work to sound like. And so my really big trick is with each one of my books, I choose one person and I write the book to that person as if it were a letter that they alone will read.
So I have a really good friend that I would say I'm sort of pen pals with. We email each other whenever we can, which is not as frequent as I think both of us would like, but we are super relaxed and chilled about it. But through our mails, we have both got such deep insight into each other's lives, and I'm so moved by our correspondence that I think I know exactly who I will have in mind when it comes to thinking about who I'm writing to when I'm writing this book. The next thing that I have started to do is identify the acts. So I like to have an idea of what the inciting incident will be, what my beginning of Act 2 will be, what my midpoint will be, how things will turn from there, how I'll break into the last act. I have videos explaining all 3 of the acts in depth that I will link below in case you yourself would be interested in using the 3-act structure for your book. So basically, the inciting incident is something that happens quite early on in your book. It's a moment where your character's life is turned upside down, causing them to take action or begin their journey. Then as they break into Act 2, this is where the fun and games are, before the midpoint where they either have a false win or a false defeat. And then from there it goes in the opposite journey. So then if things were going well for them up until the midpoint, things start going bad. If things were going bad for them up until the midpoint, then this is when there's a bit of a turnaround and it seems like things are going good. But then something else needs to happen for us to break into the 3rd act. And here we will have our climax or our resolution. Again, I'll link the videos that explain each act in depth in the description below. But the next thing I try to do is just answer some questions. I like to have a coffee or just set myself up in an environment that allows for inspired thinking. But I like to look at the start of my book, the middle of my book, and the end of my book. And I like to answer these 3 questions. Where is my character at the start of the book? Who is my character at the start of the book, and what does my character need to learn at the start of the book? And then I repeat this for the middle of the book as well as the end of the book. Next, I like to brainstorm all of the things that my character has to lose by going on this journey, but also by staying in the same place. And I don't know if you've just watched that Netflix series, Nobody Wants This. Oh my goodness, I just love that. But something they did so well in that series is early on, they communicated the protagonists or the lead characters' wants. So both of them, it was very clear what they both wanted. And then very soon after, they communicated both of the characters' biggest fears. That gives the audience something to buy into, something to root for, or something to fear with the character, or it just gives the audience some context on the character. But I like to write down the answers to that for my characters in my novel. So just outlining what is their biggest fear and what is their wants or desires. And it's not a bad idea to see if those change or how those change throughout the middle and the end of the book as well. Now, things are about to change because historically how I would go about this next step is I would take 4 pieces of paper and label them Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, and Act 3, and then I would get some post-its and try write out some scenes. But everything changed for me the day that I had set out to do that, when I first did that morning pages activity that I spoke of earlier, especially on that specific part where I write the letter to love. For everybody who feels that the creative process is something that sort of just comes through you, you might really relate to this. Now, I'm going to share what I wrote to myself from a space of love, and I feel quite vulnerable doing that. I wrote, "You're getting to the real part of putting your book together. This is exciting. Turn up, that's the hard part. From here you can do anything. The ideas will appear, they always do." And I just reached over for that book that I write one thing in every single day to do with my book. And I broke it up into then and now. As I mentioned, I was inspired to do based on that structure that I found really appealing in that book, The Girls of Summer. and chapter ideas literally just flowed through my pen. I mean, there's enough chapter ideas that I wrote down. That's enough for a whole book. I'm more than sure of that. And because this is pretty autobiographical, I don't feel like I need to develop the scenes too much, because just the one sentence explaining the chapter is all that I really need. So I feel like I'm good to go. So it's not how I usually would go about things, but I'm not complaining. I'm happy to change things up this time around because it just feels good, and I'm happy to go with the flow. Now, the final thing that I'm mentioning today, but which is definitely not the last thing I do, but I would say it's actually one of the first things I do. But anyway, I focus on the theme. I try to get an idea of what the theme is for the book, because I just find it so much easier to know what the theme is and make sure that everything sort of feeds into the theme. Otherwise, the story can just feel all over the place. I feel like a theme is the golden thread that helps me stay on track when I'm writing, but it also sets a nice tone for the book from beginning to end, and I try to communicate the theme quite early on in the book. So far, that's all that I'm planning to do for Preptober. I've still got quite a bit of time in October, so I might add a few more things as the month goes on, and if I do, I'll let you guys know. But that said, let me know what you do when it comes to outlining your novels. I'm so used to writing screenplays that this novel world is still very new to me, so I'd love to learn as much as I can. So far, the process has been pretty cool, and I'm excited to continue prepping. Good luck with all of your prep. I will see you in the next video. Bye.